In September 2023, we hired a boat from Napton Narrowboats. Cruising on the canals is a remarkably relaxing activity. You just move along slowly at 2 or 3 miles per hour, admiring the scenery, watching the world go by, with a little bit of traffic noise perhaps in the background, but otherwise just the gentle throb of the diesel engine. Our trip took us along the Oxford Canal, the Coventry Canal, and up the Ashby Canal. And it was the Ashby Canal that we went on our honeymoon 39 years before. So it was a little bit of a trip down memory lane. Moving along the canal, you'll pass other boats going the other way and wave and acknowledge the drivers of each of those boats. As I say, it is very relaxing. Within a few minutes of getting on the boat, having unloaded your food, alcohol and clothes, then you can enjoy the peace and tranquility of the British countryside. The canals are kept in reasonably good condition, clear of most rubbish. However, they are getting shallower and it can be difficult at times to keep your movement along and not ground at the sides. Particularly when you're approaching bridges and you're trying to aim for the centre of the bridge arch, and then you discover that you're just about grounding on one side or the other. The Oxford Canal that we started on is technically only a narrow canal, but actually it is reasonably wide in many places. Although, as you can see here, the reeds have grown up on the way from the towpath. The norm is that boats are moored on the towpath side of the canal, to the left in this case, although at private moorings you may find boats moored on the opposite side, or even on both sides. When going past a moored boat, one slows right down till the engine is just ticking over, so you just creep past with the minimum of wash. One of the challenges of a narrowboat is that the engine and tiller are at the back of the boat, and steering is an interesting exercise until you become used to it. Because the tiller is at the back, what you do is to use that tiller to move the back in the opposite direction to the direction you want the front to go, and the whole boat pivots on roughly the middle of the boat. So often you are aiming for somewhere and then you will start turning and you'll turn in at the last moment to actually get through a bridge or around a corner. Let's just enjoy the tranquility for a few moments. Canals are flat. They're not like a river where water flows. And so to go up or down hills you need to have something called locks. Locks are compartments in the canal where the water level can be adjusted with a boat sitting in them. The route we had chosen only had 3.5 locks in each direction. We'll talk about the half lock when we get to it. But now we're approaching the first of the locks on our trip. And this lock is going to take us down by about 6 feet or 2 meters. The water level in the lock is aligned with that in the canal on the approach, and then the gates are opened. Canal boats are quite a specific width. They're designed to just fit neatly into the locks. There is about 6 inches to spare on either side. It is just enough so that the boat will not stick in the lock as it goes up or down, and it gets the maximum amount of width within the space available. For this first lock we were lucky to have an assistant from the Canal and River Trust.
They're saying we're going to get a heat wave.
Yeah. 1st of September.
Once the boat is into the lock, the gate is closed behind it, and the driver brings the boat to a stand in the middle of the lock. Because we only had a 2-person boat of about 40-45 feet long, we didn't use the whole length of the lock. That made it a lot easier to control the boat. With the top gate closed, the crew go to the front and open 2 paddles. The paddles have a winding gear on the surface, which works via a rod to pull a board out of the flow of water. This allows the water to flow out from the lock into the lower part of the canal, and slowly the boat begins to descend. Everything on the canal takes its time, even working down in a lock. So much water has to flow out. Going down is quite a gentle process. When you're in a lock that is being filled with water, it can be a little bit more turbulent. One thing you have to be aware of is that the back of the boat could get caught on the gate at the top, and so the boat has to be kept just far enough away so as not to catch on what is known as the sill, a stone block that supports the top gates. In this type of lock, the top gate is a single gate, but the bottom of the lock has 2 smaller gates, each with a paddle attached to it. Once the water level is the same as the lower canal, then the gates swing easily and the boat can be driven out. Remember, there's not much room on either side, but with careful driving you can avoid too many bumps. Whilst the boat is leaving, the paddles are lowered to seal the gates for the next journey through by a boat. It is quite common for the locks to be in small groups or flights, and so having left the first lock, it is not far until the second lock will come into sight. But Let's move on and talk about that half lock. Sometimes where two different canal companies joined, they wanted to make sure that the new canal didn't steal water, which was very precious, from the old canal. And so they would create a little mini lock on the entrance to the older canal. A small drop of perhaps 6 inches to a foot, so that water always flowed from the new canal to the old canal. And we're approaching one of those now. It's just beyond the little bridge. Cruising slowly in, trying to not create any wash for the moored boats, and also to avoid bumping the stonework on either side. So this is where the rerouted Oxford Canal joins the Coventry Canal, and it's quite an odd junction. We're now actually running parallel to the Coventry Canal to enter this stop lock. So as we enter the stop lock, we come to a stand. Of course, in boat terms, it's not just a case of stopping the engine. You actually have to use a little bit of reverse to stop. Otherwise, the boat will just continue to drift on.
I've been trying not to come out.
Yep.
I can't go to the sphere. So I can go over and wave at you.
With the top gate closed, again, the crew can move down to the paddles at the front
Yes.
to let the water out and allow the boat down its small drop of about 6 to 12 inches. This shouldn't take too long. Whenever the paddles are open to allow water in or out of the lock, you get some interesting flows and the boat will move forwards or backwards. Sometimes forwards and then backwards, without any control being applied from the engine. So in this case, we wanted to go back on the Coventry Canal, which is over to the right, and back in the opposite direction to the one we're currently pointing in. This is going to need a 180-degree turn, which in our smaller boat isn't too bad. But if it had been a full length 60-foot canal boat, then that would be a challenge. So with the gate open, we can now commence the manoeuvre, leaving the stop block and then swinging round to go under a bridge and then right into the Coventry Canal.
I'm going to go over onto the right because he's struggling to get round at the moment.
With other boats using the canal, one has to keep a good lookout to see where they are and what they're doing. In this case, a large cargo boat was turning around in the bridge before going back on the canal the opposite way to the way we wanted to go. So sometimes you just hang back a little bit to see what's going to happen. It's one of the beauties of the canal. You've got all the time in the world. As you can see, it was a lovely sunny day. It was getting quite warm sitting at the driving position at the rear of the narrowboat. But at least one had a pub on the left to look at, some canal architecture, a lockman or cabin to the right, and once we go round the corner we'll see an old pump house. So in order to make the turn, one first needs to swing round to the left, so that you can then swing round to the right, remembering of course that the boat pivots on the middle. And you can't start turning until the rear has cleared the lock itself, otherwise the rear will bang the side wall. Another feature of a canal boat is without the propeller running, it won't steer. It requires the water to be rushing past the tiller in order to steer the boat. So you need to put a little bit of power on in order to get a good steerage.
Yeah.
So swinging over to the left and then judging it just right to push the tiller all the way to the left so that the bow will go to the right. At this point it looks like we're aiming to go and join the pub people at their tables outside. But now with the tiller hard over, the boat begins to swing round to the right, ready to go through the bridge. Because the other boat was still in the bridge hole in the way, we just slowed down to have a little look. It was being winched back slowly clear of the bridge, so we were now clear to get through. So a little bit of power and the tiller, and then the boat will twist round neatly to go through the bridge. It's always disconcerting until the boat begins to turn, that you may not move round far enough to actually miss the bridge piers. And then of course you need to stop it turning by pushing the rudder a little bit the other way. So straight out through the middle of the bridge and then swinging round gently to the right past moored boats to head up the Coventry Canal. and approaching what looks like the remains of another stop block on the Coventry Canal. Not sure what this was here for. It may have been to collect tolls from those using the canal. That was not uncommon. And on the left you can see an engine house which would have operated pumps, probably to pump water up from a local river and fill the canal. Once again, there's only a few inches of clearance on either side. I'm trying to judge it so that the boat goes through without bouncing off either side. Not always possible, and all canal boats have scrapes and bumps along their side walls. So having made our way through the lock, I thought I'd give you a look inside. We'd hired a Regency class from Napton narrowboats. This was one of their luxury lines. Designed just for 2 people, it had a cabin at the rear with kitchen and nice chairs, and then in the middle a full-width bathroom with a bath, which we didn't use other than washing feet. So the bathroom was fully equipped with a toilet, and then at the front of the boat was a bedroom. And just fitting into the width of the boat was a king-size double bed, which did make getting from one end to the other a little bit of a challenge, but it was comfortable at night. And then out of the front of the boat one could look and see what was happening. Sometimes, rather than using locks to climb up and over a hill, the easiest answer was to dig a hole under the hill. And so we're approaching one of the tunnels on our route. Canal tunnels are about wide enough for one boat. Sometimes you could have got 2 through. Some were built for a wider style of boat, but you probably wouldn't be able to pass 2 narrowboats. This particular one requires you to look through and see whether there is anything coming, and if not, then you can go. Others have got traffic lights or timed departures. As often happens with the canal tunnels, they're not quite lined up with the canal on approach, so the driver can't actually see the far end of the tunnel, and you have to rely on the crew to tell you it's clear. Driving through a tunnel is actually less scary than it sounds. Because the water is constrained within the 2 walls of the tunnel, actually it keeps the boat straight most of the time, and as long as you don't overreact, then you'll be able to steer the boat easily straight through the tunnel. As one enters, you can just about make out sometimes the light at the end of the tunnel, but some tunnels have actually got kinks in them, and you can't see the light at the end until you get about halfway through. The light on the front of the boat lights up the walls. This tunnel was about 250-300 metres long, so it only takes a couple of minutes to cruise through. Mercifully, it was also quite dry. You didn't get drips down your neck, as you do in some of the wetter tunnels. Maintaining a steady 2.5 miles an hour, you just pedal gently through the tunnel. Make your way through, the light at the far end changes from just being a low spot to beginning to have colour, and begin to have definition. And as you approach the exit, you can see the trees, the banks, and sometimes a boat waiting to come in. Final approach to the exit of the tunnel often seems to take a long time. The tunnel mouth is getting bigger and bigger, and yet we're not there yet. Looks like we're nearly there. You can see more light in the tunnel walls reflecting off the water. And from the driver's position at the back, we can see that the front is nearly leaving the tunnel. And as we emerge from the tunnel, we have to take stock of where the canal goes. Do we need to turn left or right? Can we continue straight on? And leaving the tunnel, silence resumes, and now just the gentle throb of the diesel engine. Cruising on the canals is very relaxing. 2 or 3 miles an hour means you don't go very far, but the scenery changes. There's a chance to admire the plants, the trees. You might catch a glimpse of wildlife, swans, geese, moorhens and coots in the water. Sometimes the flash of blue from a kingfisher, or the stately heron standing at the side of the canal, waiting to catch his dinner. So we'll just leave you now to enjoy the quiet pleasure of a cruise along a canal.